Look at that. Huh? We're here to do another little tour. Today's gonna be a scary tour. It's a beautiful fall day, so let's ruin it with some murder. Oh, today we're gonna do the story of the first true crime murder trial in the history of the United States. There is all kinds of juiciness on this one. There's a celebrity. I know you guys love your celeb gossip, the tea. There's a scandal. There's publicity. There's all kinds of stuff. So we're gonna be doing that. Before we start, Cam, how are you?
I'm already trembling.
I know, I could tell. You're just make sure the camera stays still. Huh? You freak? All right, we're gonna talk this story. We're in Soho today to tell this little tale. Before we start, guys, if you've seen these before, you like them, check out the Patreon. That's how we fund these things. Huge help. Also, like and subscribe, big help. But I don't know, other than that, let's get this thing started, man. I'm already peeing my pants. Let's go. So let's set the stage. The year is 1799. New York City had been growing exponentially. In fact, 10 years before, there was like 30,000 people. By 1799, 60,000 people. I know that's not a lot today. That's like the line for cronuts down the street. But back then it was a big deal. So I'm standing in front of the Purdy House, the Josiah Purdy House, which is ironic because it's a Purdy house. Okay. Anyways, this was built in 1818 to kind of give you an idea of what the neighborhood was like back then. It's the oldest house in Soho. But this is to give you an idea. We have the cobblestone streets. People lived outside of the city here. This was kind of the suburbs back then. There was farms, there was big properties and estates that wouldn't be chopped up for development for another decade or two. So 1799, this is what was going on. And also another thing that was happening at the time, that 1799 was also the year, December 14th, was the day that George Washington died. That's right. That's this guy. I got a picture of him in my wallet. You got to carry a picture around of him in your wallet. Kiss that. I'm not gonna kiss that, it's disgusting. Right nearby was a very important spot over on Greenwich Street. It's no longer there, and it would be really corny if we just went there and showed video footage of something that's no longer present, right? 208 Greenwich Street was where Elias and Catherine Ring ran a boarding house. They were both Quakers, so their god was the Lord of the Rings. Huh? Pretty good. At that boarding house was a woman named Julielma Sands. It was a cousin of Catherine, and she had boarded there for 3 years. There was also another man named Levi Weeks who lived there for a little bit with his apprentice. And Julielma was going to marry, or at least told them that she was going to marry this man, Levi Weeks, when they left on December 22nd, 1799, for a nice little outing on the town to party like it was 1799. But something bad was going to happen. What was going to happen? I don't know. Maybe we need to go to the next stop and figure that out. Okay, so we already talked about how there was a little boarding house here. Well, now I'm back in Soho, and this is an area known as Lispenard Meadows. So they go out December 22nd, have fun. Who knows what happens? She goes missing. And there's all this chatter. What happened to Julielma? Well, 2nd of January, her body is found in a well that was located right here behind me. So this is actually 129 Spring Street. It's actually a COS or COS or whatever the hell store it is. It's owned by H&M, I just know that. And anyways, the well is still in there. You can see it if you go in there. And she was found there, dead. Strangulation on her neck, all kinds of stuff. And what happens? What happened now? Huh? Yeah, well, they look at Levi Weeks, her paramour, as the answer, and he starts freaking out. What's he gonna do? He has to do something. Everyone's talking, so he goes to his brother Ezra Weeks, who was very well connected. We'll get into that, but he went to him for help because as far as connections in the city and prestige, it didn't get any better than Ezra. That was a pretty good little pun there, huh? You know better than Ezra, Cam? All right, that's a 90s band. All right, I'm old as hell. Anywho, their well was actually put here by the Manhattan Water Company, which was started by Aaron Burr. So Ezra Weeks was connected because he actually ran the Tontine City Hotel. He was working with John McComb on designing the Grange, which is Alexander Hamilton's house in Harlem, and he supplied materials for the pipes of the Manhattan Water Company, which was owned by Aaron Burr. You can already see where this is going. Speaking of which, Manhattan Water Company was one who set up this well here on Spring Street, which is named that way because of this spring that was located here in the water. Now, Burr was a little bit of a little scoundrel because he only set up that water company to be able to hide a clause in the formation of it to open a bank. Banks weren't just given out to anybody, and he wanted to open a bank to compete with the Bank of New York, which belonged to Hamilton. Look at that. So he opens his water company. It's kind of a front. It was a total disaster. The water was dirty. It was a total mess. But he got his bank, Manhattan, the Manhattan Bank, which eventually combined with Chase Manhattan. That became part of JP Morgan Chase. Look at that. You guys are learning a ton. But that just goes to show that in New York, most of New York, from the skyscrapers to the banks, are really just a result of a huge pissing contest. What a shock. And because he got his bank, he skimped on the whole Manhattan Water Company thing. So the water company was a disaster. It was dirty. It was breaking down. So Burr died doubly disgraced as a murderer and as a complete cheapskate. And so the Manhattan Water Company actually kept going until 1900, believe it or not, as kind of the front for the bank or whatever. They kept pumping water just to kind of keep it in place. But yeah, it was at the Manhattan Water Company's well where Julie Elma Sands was found, because Lispenard's Meadows was where they used to go, you know, running through the wet grass, falling a step behind, both of them never tiring, desperately wanting. You remember that song, Cam?
Nope.
Really? All right, well, thanks a lot. Leave me hanging out to dry. All right, well, anyways, that's the well, and we're gonna go to the next spot, man. What's gonna happen to good old Levi Weeks? Hey, what's up, dude? All right, so Julie Elma Sands, she's dead. Now this is where it gets interesting, because Levi Weeks is the guy everyone's looking at, but like I said, he's got a brother, he got the connections. So the trial of the century starts on 31st of March, 1800. Now, the prosecution lined up their guy. Well, first of all, before we get to that, the judge, his name was John Lansing. He was the judge of the Supreme Court of New York, already a big deal. He sat on the bench with Richard Varick, who was the mayor of New York, already a big deal. Now keep in mind, this is at a time when everyone wanted to up their political kind of capital, right? So everyone wanted to be involved in this case in some way. So let's start with the prosecution. Cue, you know, Chicago Bulls intro music. Bom, 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 you know? You know what I'm talking about, Cam? Great.
Got me there.
I'm glad I got you. The prosecution was made up of a man named Cadwallader David Colden. So first thing he did in his opening statement, you can see this in there. In the opening statement, he goes up there and he says, he acknowledges the fact that the defense attorneys are way better than him, which doesn't bode well. I don't think that makes a good impression, but you know what? It was a young country. He's still figuring out his strategy. I guess self-deprecation might have been his strategy, but hey, he found himself eventually, because 10 years later, he became the mayor of New York. But, you know, he goes up there and he says that they're all better than him, which begs the question, who was this defense team, huh? So this is where it gets interesting. Bom, 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 bom. At lawyer Brockholst Livingston, whose grandfather actually did the oath of office for Washington at this spot behind me here on Wall Street. His father was a governor of New York, and he eventually became a Supreme Court justice, which goes to show you that the only thing more American than apple pie is nepotism, baby. Speaking of which, next lawyer up on deck, Aaron Burr. Yeah, talk about nepotism. His grandfather started Princeton, and guess where he graduated from? Princeton University. So let that be a lesson, all you guys watching. You guys got a college in mind, just have one of your parents start it. Then you'll be the first graduate of whatever college you start. Another guy on the team, Alexander Hamilton, his big rival. They actually teamed up as the lawyer team for this case. Alexander Hamilton, young upstart. He had started the Bank of New York. He was a big deal. He was a Treasury Secretary, already a Treasury Secretary of the United States. So this was his freaking defense team. The prosecution brings its witnesses, right? Catherine Ring, the cousin, the boarding house, right? She comes up and basically says all this stuff. Then you have Elias Ring coming up. He's the husband of Catherine Ring. He actually says that he mentioned the possibility to Levi Weeks that he thought Levi did it. And he said Levi turned white as ash and trembled like a leaf, which in 2024 translates into he shit himself. You know, he completely shit himself. He thought he was caught. So you had this other guy named Richard David Croucher, who was this man about town. He was always handing out handbills, and he was always going on about goblins and ghouls and ghosts, yelling at people in the streets. I think I saw him on the C train on the way down here. You also had another guy named William Anderson, who was the apprentice of Levi Weeks, who had boarded in the house with Levi Weeks and said that sometimes Levi would sneak out and just go really close to him and look at him and hear if he was sleeping, and he would be awake and he'd be like feeling it happen, which is creepy as hell. I've never been asleep and had someone get really close to me like that and see if I was awake, and they have good intentions. Actually, I've never had that happen at all. It's kind of be weird if I did. They also had expert witnesses. This is interesting, they actually brought a dentist on the stand, even though the dentist wasn't really specialized, but he was interested in medicine. This is, I guess, the standard for being an expert back then. Remember, there were like 2 medical schools before the revolution in the entire country. So, you know, back then you could get away with it. Today it'd be a little weird if you're like, for my expert witness, I have this guy who's been watching YouTube videos for 2 weeks. Please take the stand, sir. They also had 3 kids that they wanted to bring who actually found earmuffs at the well, but they had to toss them out because they didn't understand what an oath was. Remember, there was no public school back then. You were either going to get educated by your parents or by the church. And we all know how much kids love church. The defense then brought its own case. They brought one man named Demas Mead, who was actually the apprentice of Ezra Weeks, who testified that Levi Weeks was there when the screams were heard by some of the witnesses of the prosecution. Already, who knows if that's true, but they had someone testifying. They also cross-examined Richard David Croucher, who I told you was the guy posting handbills, and what they did was they put the candlelight right up to his face to show everyone in the courtroom how crazy he looked. That's their defense. That's actually an official legal defense, I can tell you. That's a legal defense of look at this freak. That's what it's called. It's a look at this freak defense. They also brought John McComb, who was a world-famous architect. He's the guy who designed City Hall, designed a tons of buildings here in New York, and they brought him up to say that as a character witness, to say that Levi Weeks was tender. He was too tender to do something like this. That's another famous defense. That's a too tender to murder someone defense. And then it went off to deliberate with the jury. They deliberated for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's not even enough time to walk into the room and sit down. They didn't even take advantage of the free takeout. Come on, you at least got to order some chicken tenders or something. But 5 minutes is all it took, and they came out and acquitted him. So this is Federal Hall National Monument. Federal Hall used to be located here. Federal Hall was where George Washington was sworn in as first president of the United States, and it's where this trial took place in 1800. But this is where the trial ended, on the 2nd of April, 1800. Pretty quick. But yeah, pretty interesting. Yeah. But what happens next? I don't know. All right, so the aftermath of everything was also pretty insane. So obviously Levi Weeks wasn't going to get off scot-free, even though he did get acquitted. Everyone poured it on him, man. He got a lot of guff because, you know, we got to remember back then people were pretty bored when they weren't just trying to avoid catching yellow fever. He was eventually shooed out of the city. He actually ran away because he was dealing with so much crap from people. He went to Deerfield, Massachusetts, and then was run out of there. Eventually went to the place where most criminals end up. No, not Florida. They actually ended up in Mississippi. Yeah, that's right, Mississippi. You know, they had their own murders a few decades back. That's a whole nother video, pretty dark. But yeah, that's where he ended up. He designed some buildings, he did other stuff, but yeah, he lived with that scarlet letter for the rest of his life. And the reason we know any of this stuff is because there were actually transcripts of the murder trial. This is the first murder trial in the United States history that was actually recorded. So there have been books written about this. And the general consensus after the fact was that it was your classic tale, you know, boy meets girl, boy has an affair with girl, boy murders girl and throws her into a well to avoid marrying her, you know. I'm sure there's a Nora Ephron screenplay about it somewhere. And the way that the defense won the case was, biographers say that they had basically took a strategy of just painting Julie Elma Sands as none too virtuous, which I think is a Britney Spears song. I'm none too virtuous, you know? Sorry, that was really bad. Cam is shaking his head. Now, that just goes to show that, you know, some legal defenses are as old as the country itself, victim blaming. That's not where it all ends, though. So I'm standing in front of the grave of Alexander Hamilton. We'll get to him in a second. But after the acquittal, Catherine Ring, they say, stood up in the courthouse, so angry that she pointed to the defense team and said, "If thee dies a natural death, I shall think there no justice in heaven." It's a pretty brutal statement to give to somebody. I got that statement 3 times on the way down here, from people on the sidewalk, but pretty important, and it actually worked, they say, and it created a curse. So Brockholst Livingston, believe it or not, got into a duel with a man named James Jones in the 1820s, and he killed him. And was so depressed, he died of a permanent melancholy, they say, permanent melancholy. I mean, it must have been pretty bad because, unfulfilled potential was enough to send me into a permanent melancholy. Then you had Judge Lansing. Judge Lansing was said to have been murdered for property. He just disappeared one day. And then you had Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. And we all know what happened to them. They both became international Broadway stars. Oh, I'm just kidding. Aaron Burr murdered him. And then Aaron Burr's daughter was lost at sea, and he died a disgraced politician. And that's the curse of the case of Levi Weeks. Huh? A lot of actual law professors say today that with the evidence that was available back then, they don't even know if he would have been indicted. There was such scant evidence. So remember, this was all at the beginning of the United States. There was no legal precedent. All that stuff was still in the process of being formed. And all this happened with poor Juliana Sands, who just was a boarder at her cousin Catherine Ring's boarding house. I'm sure she would have just said to her, "It was good living with you, wow. It was good living with you, wow." You didn't think I was going to bring up Better Than Ezra again, but I did. Anyways, this is the cemetery here at Trinity Church. That's right, from the cradle to the grave. Dust, ashes and dust, where we all end up, huh? Sorry, that's kind of dark. Let's wrap this thing up. Oh, I was just looking around. Guys, we made it to the end. Look at that. What a scary tale, huh? Cam, did you know any of that stuff?
Absolutely nothing as usual.
All right, well, don't beat yourself up about it. That's why you're here. Part of the reason you're here. But guys, hope you guys enjoyed that. We went through the tale of Levi Weeks and poor Juliana Sands, huh? Yeah, guys, I hope you guys learned something. We got to talk about some of the founding fathers. We got to talk about we got to talk about Soho. So I don't know, man. If you guys liked it, check out the old Patreon. It's how things are done these days, baby. I know. But yeah, other than that, also like and subscribe, huge help. Share with your friends. How about that? Good old-fashioned IRL marketing. But other than that, yeah, man, we made it. Cam, what do you think, man? Should we go, I don't know, throw some leaves around or something? What do you do in the fall, huh?
Go frolic.
Go frolic, go do some apple picking. All right. See y'all later, guys. Sick.